So many of us spend a lot of our time in garden centers, especially in the spring and fall, looking for new plants. And I always feel like sometimes when I go shopping, I'm kind of surprised at how much plants actually cost. So I have come to the source, Samara Farms, with Matt Dawson, and we're going to talk just a little bit about how plants are produced, what's involved, and sometimes why plants cost what they cost. So thanks, Matt, for having us out today, and really appreciate being here. One of the great examples that everybody is familiar with of good landscape plants are Annabelle hydrangeas. And so here we are from a production standpoint. Tell me how you get from this point here in front of me to what we're seeing in bloom.
Okay. The Annabelle hydrangea is Hydrangea arborescens, which is also one of our native plants.
Right.
And it is well known because of its flower. It actually is a sterile flower. It does not produce seed. So in order to create this plant that doesn't seed and have this type of bloom, because the native hydrangea has a flat bloom, it's not as showy. Not as showy. So this plant was actually selected for that purpose. In order to create more identical ones, you have to do what is called asexual propagation, which means that we would take a cutting off of this plant, like if we cut it right here, and then cut the flower off, and then stuck it into a tray that held multiple little pots like this. Then that plant would root out into this and create a new plant that is genetically identical to the one you see flowering.
Right.
That then allows us to have a uniform crop that everybody's getting the plant that they want.
Right.
It's not a hit or miss.
Sure.
It is a sure thing, which is what the garden centers want. When the people take it home, they want that proven winner. They want that
You
product.
know that when you buy Annabelle hydrangea, it is Annabelle.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so through that process, this is a 2-year-old plant then at this point,
right,
from a baby. So we've got 2 years in this, 2 years of irrigation, 2 years of fertilizer.
Yeah.
At this point, it goes to what's the 3-gallon pot.
Yep.
This has just been potted into this. The 3-gallon pot now is one of the most common sellable sizes that you see.
Right.
The larger plant below is a 7. We go from 3s to 7s.
Right.
So once we get it to a sellable 3-gallon size, we've got another 2 years in it.
Right.
So that then is a 4-year-old plant from the initial starting point.
From taking the cutting, 4 years to 3 gallons.
4 years to 3 gallons on an Annabelle. Annabelles grow pretty quick.
Right.
To get to this big plant, which is what most people would want, it's then another 2 years. So now we're looking at 6 years to create an Annabelle hydrangea that's been cut back properly, well branched. And so that's to me as a nurseryman, that's kind of a long-term investment of my capital and money.
Right.
Not to mention that there are other aspects of crop failure, problems that arise.
Right.
Not every plant lives.
Yeah.
So we will have loss. So we have to account for that as well.
Right. Right. And here we're just really talking about container production. Then when you get to field production of things, that adds another level. And field production, I mean, you could produce Annabelles in the field, but a lot of times your field production is saved for even longer term crops, like your boxwoods and your shade trees and flowering trees and things that need to be in the ground. And then you're talking about from cuttings or from grafted liners. We would call this a liner in the industry a lot of times. You're talking about probably a minimum 7-year investment, and in some cases 10 years, 15 years, depending on the size of the plant, the ultimate size of the plant and all that. So it is a huge investment in time and resources.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So we're planting today for what our projections are of where the economy will be 5 years from now.
Right.
In most cases. Now that's for trees and shrubs. You know, the perennials, we can turn those a lot faster.
Yeah.
We can force those in heated houses, which allows us to then make longer months for them to grow here in Tennessee, or you just produce them further south and ship them up.
Right, right. And with perennials, if you start with a plug this size, depending on the plant and how fast it grows and fills out, that may be an investment of just a few months to maybe up to a year or two. And then you can generally turn a perennial back out, send it out into the, either into a landscape project or to a garden center.
Yes, of course. The perennials we grow in similar houses. This is actually called a hoop house that's behind us here. And so we're able then to cover this with plastic during the winter.
In the winter.
And then we can put heaters in it. During the summer, we can
open
it. We can put shade cloth on it, so it becomes multi-purpose.
Right.
The way we're set up here with the space between the houses, as these get bigger, we spread them out in between. If we don't sell them all by winter, we can push them in together and protect them. And they call it a cold frame house because it doesn't have regular heat.
Right.
With the plastic on it though, we can produce a perennial. If we start it from a liner in February, I could be selling it in 4 months. So perennials usually are a lot cheaper than a 1 gallon, say Annabelle Hydrangea. If I put this into a 1, your Annabelle Hydrangea should cost you probably a third to 50% more. Because of the longevity it took to grow it. And that has a lot to do with the trees and shrubs as well.
And then talk a little bit about harvesting plants in the nursery industry, digging trees and shrubs, and what's involved in that. I know when I was growing up in the nursery industry, or working in the nursery industry when I was growing up, we dug everything by hand. It's all balled and burlapped by hand up until probably about my last year before I moved to Tennessee. So there is a tremendous amount of labor involved. But now you guys have equipment that will do a lot of that.
We do. So. Granted, the equipment doesn't last forever. And it's very expensive equipment. But as all industries have moved towards mechanization, due to labor shortage, due to multiple reasons, due to the fact that it always shows up and it always does its job as long as it's not broken. It's very beneficial. So these are machines that have spade blades. So they'll dig into the ground, and there'll be 4 of them. And that allows you then you can harvest a tree 5-6 times faster, which in turn helped reduce the cost of the tree and allowed us to sell larger trees for less than what it would be if we hand dug them. A lot less, because the labor is often one of the larger costs in producing the plant. The plant does its thing. And of course, the land does its thing.
It's just an investment in time.
It's investment in time, and land resource.
Land resource, of
if you looked at it, the nursery is leasing the land. Every square foot has a dollar value. And if you aren't earning that square footage on your property, then you're not managing it well in order to produce what it could be producing, say, if you just rented it to something else.
So you mentioned that perennials really are a quicker turnaround for you, and Rudbeckia would be a great example of that probably. What kind of production time are you looking at on something like this?
Okay, these were potted up in late January, early February. At that point in time, the hoop house had plastic over it, and so even though it was 30 to 40 degrees outside, we were maintaining 50 to 70 inside the house. And then nighttime temperatures, we always kept above freezing. So some perennials that are a little bit tender, if they're up and you get closer to freezing, you may need to add heaters.
Some heat.
But in most cases, we've been very successful in being able to start the perennial far faster than you would if we were just leaving it up to outside temperatures without protection. So this product here, like I said, is now a sellable, ready to go 1 gallon, and we were able to produce that in about a 5-month time period.
So this is Rudbeckia Prairie Sun, and there's a lot of information usually on plant tags. I was just looking to see, because one of the other contributing factors to the cost of plants is whether they are patented or not. And then you're getting into a royalty situation where you, as the production end of things, are paying a royalty. Talk a little bit about royalties in the plant industry and what they are and what they're for.
Okay, plant selection and breeders are always trying to find that new thing, that new item that they think is going to be
the next
hit.
hot plant.
Yeah, it's their retirement plan. It's their golden ticket, let's say. So royalties come about when they've patented or planted, and anyone that wants to produce it has to then pay for the right to be able to create more babies of that plant through propagation, which we discussed briefly earlier.
Yeah.
So on top of that, they're also doing the marketing for that plant.
Sure.
So the royalty helps pay for the magazine ads, and on top of that,
and the pretty colorful labels.
And the labels, and the specialty pots that we're starting to see now, the branding that's going on.
Or sometimes when you walk into a garden center, you see a big banner flying somewhere for bloomstruck hydrangeas, or just any number of different plants that are out there on the market. But those are all varieties that have been patented by somebody. So that adds again to the cost of that plant. And some people may say, well, why would I pay more for X when I could have a non-patented version of something, that costs me less money? But that selection has been made for a reason, generally because it's improved in some way, correct?
Right, or it's that plant in that new special color.
Right,
or
it's unique somehow.
Right, like this flower here is massive. If you see the size of that compared to other Rudbeckia, and it's two-tone. You've got the orange fading to yellow. So it's prettier. It has incredibly sturdy stems. You can see how thick and dense it is. So a breeder not only thinks about the color, but thinks about the structure.
The performance.
Right. You don't want to have something that the nurseryman tries to propagate 100, but only 15 come up looking great.
Right.
You want a plant with vigor, toughness, durability, bulletproof. Really, the breeders are after trying to create something that the homeowner cannot mess up with.
And so really what that patent does is it helps pay the breeder for their work and their investment, because anybody who follows me on social media knows that I dabble around in daylilies some, and I'm getting ready to introduce some to the market, I hope, but that's been a 10-year process just to get to, finally where I have enough plants and enough that I think are good enough to even entertain trying to get them out there on the market. So I've invested 10 years of my time in creating these new plants, and my hope is, again, that maybe some of the plants will start paying me back for my investment in their time and care. So there's that angle always to look at. Well, Matt, thank you so much for having us out to the nursery and explaining just a little bit more about what's involved in the production process and helping all of our gardeners at home understand just why that plant at the garden center costs what it costs.
Thank you for coming out.
For inspiring garden tours, growing tips, and garden projects, visit our website at volunteergardener.org or on YouTube at the Volunteer Gardener channel, and like us on Facebook.